Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Open Class 126. We've got three questions today, so let's get right into it. Our first question is from Enrico. It says, I have a few questions for you, and I hope that you'll have time to answer. Always, Enrico. Number one, when I can't sleep, I have these recurrent waves of anxiety during the night and also during the day. I notice that if I say to myself, okay, this is just a wave, I'm ready to have more if my brain has decided so, the wave peaks and then fades. But after some time, it returns. In other words, being ready to suffer more helps to suffer less, but it's not enough to have a plain C. Is that true? Can I do something else to not struggle with my anxiety more? Will the waves end one day? I'm just going to pause there since that's a great question. And these waves of anxiety that you're referring to, I mean, they're so common. Everyone with, insomnia is struggling with their own version of what these anxiety waves might look like. And, they really happen because of our brain being stuck in hyperarousal, right? It has essentially learned fear when it comes to not being able to sleep at night, being awake, or even the nighttime itself. So we have so much learned fear in our brains and so much hyperarousal that it starts to kind of create these anxiety waves that you might be feeling in the form of lots of anxious thoughts, or you might have various physical symptoms to go along with that as well. All of that is super common. And I love what you said here about really almost like riding the wave of that anxiety. And you've noticed that if you're accepting of it and if you're willing to face it, that the waves calm. And what you're noticing is that eventually the waves will come back again. And I can understand that this would feel frustrating because you've been willing to accept and face and ride that wave of anxiety. And of course, we don't want it to come back. But at the same time, that experience you had of being willing to experience it and ride that wave, so to speak, is so significant. So much so that in the moment you noticed that the anxiety kind of peaked and then it went down and it went away. And so, when we're in that hyper aroused state and when our brain is creating a lot of anxiety, we really don't have a lot of control in the moment if we're experiencing anxiety. We can't force it to go away, but we do have some control over our mental and emotional response to the anxiety that shows up, which is exactly what you're describing here, right? Being willing to experience it. And our response to the anxiety can either reinforce to our brain that what's happening is a threat and it's scary, which creates more and more anxiety, or it can reinforce to our brain that what's happening is safe and it's okay. And even though it doesn't feel good, we're still safe in the moment. And that results in less and less anxiety over time. So even though you had this experience of, it peaked, but then it came back, it's because these things take time, right? Like your brain essentially learned fear and now it has to unlearn that. And it does take time. And, I think you're on the right track. Your approach, keep doing what you're doing and being willing to experience it. And over time, you'll see you'll have fewer and fewer of these anxiety waves, fewer symptoms of this anxiety. And that, yes, like over time, you'll notice that it will go away. And this happens as that hyperarousal goes down. And, but it's not linear, right? So it's an up and down process, and it really does just require allowing a little bit more time to pass. So let's go on to the next part of this question. Okay. After a setback, every time I feel a deep sense of discouragement that affects me the most. Maybe I have not yet accepted my bad emotions and I still want to get rid of them once and for all. Or perhaps I can't detach from catastrophic thoughts. Do you have any advice for that? I fear that this discouragement will fill my mind and I won't have the strength to go on and accept my situation. It's a great question. Well, the first thing is I noticed when you use the word setback. Um, so, one of the things that can happen is typically when we're recovering from insomnia, there'll be a period of time where we're doing better and we get really excited and we think this is it, right? And we don't realize that recovering from insomnia is, it involves a lot of ups and downs. And so often when we hit our first speed bump, and I'm calling it a speed bump rather than a setback because a setback insinuates that you've taken all these steps back, that you've somehow lost progress, which really that isn't true at all. It's that you're making progress, but that progress is almost like a staircase, right? You're going up, but it's ups and downs, it's up, and it's just kind of like that. And so when you're in a down period where you've had a speed bump, it can feel like you've taken steps back, but really you're still on that forward momentum. You're still making progress, you're still on the path to recovery. And so wording it that way, calling it a speed bump is really more what it is. It's just a bump along the way and you're still making really good progress. Now, of course, it's hard, especially in the first few speed bumps that you experience during your recovery. It's hard to not feel discouraged. It's hard to not feel, really scared and think, oh gosh, I'm going back. It's just, I'm not making progress at all. And you can get caught up with that. When really that's not what's happening. It's just that, that hyper arousal that we all have that becomes so intense and so amplified. As I mentioned before, like our brain has learned all this fear and it has to go through a process of unlearning it and learning safety. And that is a process. And so we're essentially working with our brains and trying to make our brain feel more safe around, being awake at night, even, the nighttime itself. And just because the nature of this is very up and down and takes time, it can be so easy to get discouraged. But what I like to tell people is actually to view these periods of speed bumps as opportunities because this is the opportunity to really put into practice everything that you're learning here, right? I mean, you've been learning so much about mindfulness and observing and accepting and how to show up different emotionally and mentally to all these different experiences that you're having. And it's during that speed bump that you get to actually put what you're learning into practice. It's almost like going to the gym, right? Like at first you feel horrible and it's really hard, but it's all about practice. And it's really the same with this is it's all about practice. You're building a new muscle, right? Is what this skill set really is. It's building a muscle. And because of that, it takes time. And that's why each of these speed bumps is really an opportunity for you to go, okay, I'm here. Let's start actually implementing some of the tools that I'm learning. And then through that implementation, over time, you get better and better and more comfortable so that the next time you go through a speed bump, which you will because there's ups and downs, it's a little bit less hard. And then the one after that, it's a little bit less hard and a little bit less hard. And eventually it just becomes an automatic way of, showing up to a sleepless night, or a stressor. So, as hard as it is, I would encourage you to see these speed bumps, one, as not setbacks, but speed bumps, and two, that they are really opportunities in disguise. And really, the more of these types of speed bumps that you are willing to experience, the kind of the faster recovery will go, right? Because you are building that muscle, building that muscle. So I hope that helps a little bit on that front. Let's go back to the next part of this question. Okay. The third part is if we shouldn't meditate for a goal, like calming anxiety or sleeping better, why is it so important? Everyone wants to get rid of insomnia. Your entire course is aimed at it too. How can we not follow a target and at some time hope to sleep better through meditation? Thank you and have a wonderful day. Okay, great question. So, why shouldn't we meditate for a goal like sleeping more or sleeping better? Well, a big part of this is that when we meditate or do anything for that matter with the intention of sleeping more or controlling our sleep in any way, it unintentionally becomes a sleep effort. It becomes this attempt on our part to control or to force sleep, which we can't do. And so the more we do it, the more pressure we're putting on our sleep, the more we aren't sleeping because the pressure is building, right? And so it's tricky because, of course, sleep efforts aren't this tidy list of things that we can just easily avoid because really what matters when it comes to sleep efforts is the intention behind what we're doing. So even something like meditation, like you just mentioned, can become a sleep effort if the intention behind that meditation is to make yourself sleep. I know this more than anyone because I used to use meditation this way. I used to use it as a sleep effort. And I thought, okay, the more I meditate, the more I will sleep. And of course, this didn't work. And so I would get frustrated and I would try to meditate more and more and thinking if I just do it more, I will eventually, it will force my sleep. And of course, the opposite was true. The more I was forcing, the less I was sleeping and the more frustrated and confused I became. So then you mentioned, if we're not going to meditate on, with a goal in mind, like what is the point of meditation then? And really, the point of meditation is fundamentally just to change our relationship with our thoughts and to reconnect with ourselves more closely. And so, a lot of the time when we have thoughts, especially if we're very, hyper aroused, we're very stressed, very anxious, we have a lot of thoughts coming up, and it's very easy to fall into the trap of automatically identifying with these thoughts, right? A thought will come up. Let's say it's, I'm never going to sleep again. Thought comes up, you think it, and oh, it feels horrible. Automatically believe that thought. You start to feel, physical sensations and emotions around that thought. And soon enough, you really start to create maybe even a whole belief system around that kind of thought. When really it was just a thought, a random thought that your stressed brain created. And so meditation helps us observe our own thoughts. We come into that observer role with ourselves. And when we do that, we realize that we are not our thoughts, right? Because if we're observing our thoughts, then we are not our thoughts. And so it creates some much needed distance and space between ourselves and our thoughts so that we can see that you know these are not true. These are just thoughts and these are not things we need to buy into, take action on. And we can, in fact, just observe these thoughts and let them go. And soon enough, you can kind of see, oh, okay, I can see that my brain's creating a lot of these types of thoughts. You might even notice different themes and patterns in your thoughts, especially at night. And then you can start to just realize that, they're not who you are and they're not something that you need to see through the lens of. And so that's really the benefit of meditation. It's really understanding that you're the observer of your thoughts and it's changing the relationship that you have with your thoughts so that you can observe and practice things like mindfulness. And so it really helps to practice things like meditation and to become better at things like mindfulness. Since one of the things that we talk a lot here is can you observe this, can you be with this? And so it helps to kind of practice some of these things sometimes in the daytime so that when we get to the night and a lot of these thoughts are coming up, we feel like we have some practice. So that's one reason why meditation can help, and why it's not great to meditate to force yourself to sleep. So that will backfire, unfortunately. Okay, let's go to our next question. Okay, so this one is from Jackie. Hey, Daniel, how do you stop monitoring when you head to bed at night? Prior to sleep issues, yes, we just close our eyes and sleep. But now, whenever I head into bed, I am aware and I'm on the lookout. This I know creates performance anxiety and pressure. Is it really as simple as acknowledging it and hoping for the best? If you can provide any strategies that would be helpful and how to approach going to bed at night when worry and monitoring starts to happen. Thanks. Sure. Another good question. So, this is really, really common. This is a big part of insomnia itself and also recovering from insomnia is that, because your brain is so hyper aroused, it's going to very easily go into this state of hypervigilant monitoring, right? That's likely what it's been doing the whole time. And so it's trained itself to do that because it doesn't feel safe at night and it doesn't feel safe being awake at night. So it makes complete sense. So the fact that your brain is monitoring, as frustrating as it is, and as much as we don't like the feeling of this, it's very normal and it's actually a sign that your brain is doing its job, right? Which is just trying to keep you safe. And I know that Daniel has this really great analogy of, I think it's a pink elephant analogy where, if you tell someone like, don't think of a pink elephant, think of anything else, just don't think of a pink elephant. Like you just have to think of a pink elephant, right? Because it's just so much pressure not to, and your brain's like, no, I must need to think of that. So it's a little bit similar with trying to force yourself out of this type of monitoring, especially if you've been in it for a while, right? It's the brain's pattern. Is if you tell yourself, I can't monitor, I'm not allowed to monitor, monitoring is bad, then your brain will likely monitor more. And then your response to the monitoring, of course, naturally would be a stress response. Might even judge yourself for it. And then that's going to reinforce that even monitoring is a threat, right? And then keep that loop going because then it really needs to monitor if this is a threat. And you can see how that creates the cycle of that. So I think really the best thing to do when you're in that stage where you notice that, you've got a lot of hypervigilance, you've got a lot of monitoring when you go to bed, is, step back into that role of being an observer with yourself and see if you can notice it, really observe it, and almost say, like, oh, there it is again. There's my brain monitoring, for thoughts or maybe physical sensations, like it's monitoring everything. And, make it so that it's okay that this is happening. This isn't bad. This is normal. And if you can, sometimes what happens when you go into that observer role with yourself and you're observing the monitoring and making it okay, it can shift the energy of it from one of kind of stressful hypervigilance over to a bit more relaxed or calm energy because you're in a place of observing and mindfulness with it and allowing it, and having it be okay. So I would say play around with that a little bit. See if you notice that energy shift from that stressful hypervigilance to just allowing, and it's more peaceful. And also knowing that, this monitoring will go down on its own as hypervigilance, sorry, as hyperarousal goes down, right? As you are recovering. So it's something that if you can just be really accepting of for right now and allow and observe and just know that over time you'll see less and less as the brain starts to learn that being awake at night is safe and the experience of the nighttime itself is safe. All right, let's try another one. This next one is from Jake. It says, hi, it's been a while since I have felt the need to write in as things have been going really well for me recently. Jake, that's really great to hear. So much so, sleep disappeared off my radar, so to speak, after months of it being my life. I had a good 2 months of peace. Now, after experiencing a stressor, I was having some nighttime anxiety. The stressor became a non factor, but the anxiety stayed. The last few days, I felt the anxiety well up in my chest, and it's been scary as I've not got to the root cause of what is causing it. Recently, I realized my anxiety was about feeling anxious and ultimately my sleep being disrupted as a result. Last night, I also realized all this time spent watching sleep videos and all that, I was trying to get rid of or fix my anxiety all along. So last night, I decided to just feel the emotion. I didn't watch any videos and felt quite free in the fact that I was just feeling and not thinking for once. Anyway, long story short, I barely slept. And as I trudged through my day, tired and worried, I can't help but think, here we go again. Any advice? Welcome and thanks. Thanks. Well, first of all, I'm glad that you, before this, were doing so much better. I think that's really great. The fact that you didn't even think about sleep for a couple months is really, really great to hear. So, I think one of the things that happens with a lot of us that have experienced insomnia and especially when we are, on that path to recovery is when we have a speed bump like this, and you mentioned, you went through a stressful life event of some kind, and, you know, and it creates sleeplessness. It can be very triggering for us because it just really brings us back. It makes us scared that we're going back into the depths of our insomnia, that we've made no progress at all. We have all these thoughts and fears because we have so much residual fear from the experience of insomnia, because insomnia in some ways it can be a bit emotionally like traumatizing because it's so intense, right? So our brains can hold on to some residual fear. Even if we're doing well for months, we can still have residual fear when it comes to being awake at night all of a sudden, or how our bodies respond to stress. And so it sometimes, it's not that hard for a certain life event or a stressor to kind of make us have some of those old thought patterns again and make us feel anxious and reinitiate that hyperarousal. And it's really that residual fear in our brain, and our brain trying to keep us safe by saying, wait a minute, is this a threat? And so I think in this situation, especially, like, of course, understanding that this residual fear is completely normal, and what you're experiencing is really a speed bump. It's not a setback. And the other thing that I think is really important to remember is that, you know, even people without any insomnia whatsoever, when they experience stressful life events, they lose sleep, right? So the best sleeper in the world, if they're stressed and they go through something stressful, will likely lose possibly multiple nights of sleep because of their body, being too stressed um, to really sleep normally. And when this happens to kind of like a normal sleeper, they don't really worry about it or think about it because they don't have that residual fear that I just mentioned. So for them, they know, oh, it's because I went through this stressful thing. This is going to clear up. It's going to be fine. They don't pay too much attention to it, even though they don't enjoy going through it, of course, but it's not triggering any past experience for them. So they tend to move through it more easily. So I think it's a nice reminder, one that I've needed myself as I've gone through certain stresses in life, and all of a sudden I'm not sleeping, and I think, oh no, and I was like, well, wait a minute, I wouldn't have slept even if this had happened to me years before insomnia, because it's part of our own natural response, to stress is to, not sleep so that our brain can protect us from whatever threat's going on. So just to kind of remember that that's a really normal experience to have from life stress. And for people recovering from insomnia, you're probably going to feel it more. It's going to activate more hyperarousal, again, because that residual fear is there and it's being triggered a little bit. And just knowing that this is the case can be really helpful. And so if you can just view this as a speed bump entirely, and, keep doing what you were doing before, when you were not even thinking about sleep, and just know, like, this is just temporary, and it's not going to last forever. So I'm just going to go back for a moment to that question because I think there was another part to it. Okay. I liked when you mentioned that you realized that your anxiety was, about feeling anxious. And, this is so often the case. We will start to feel anxious and then we start to get anxious about feeling anxious, right? And we all do it. And, and it's like, and of course, the moment we start to feel that anxiety and we react with anxiety, it just sends the message to our brain that that initial anxiety is not safe. That's not a safe feeling or emotion to have. And then it keeps us in the cycle and then the anxiety gets worse. And so it's really, I'm really glad that you noticed this. I think that's a really good observation that you had with yourself. And when really, so the next time it comes up, you can see if you can notice and, oh, I'm having this anxiety. Can you stay with it? Can you be willing to experience it? And that will help do the opposite, right? Send some safety cues to your brain. Be like, this is okay, even though we're feeling like this, we are still safe. So really the way that you respond to your symptoms of anxiety can either alleviate or perpetuate more anxiety. So I thought this was a really great observation you had. I also loved your observation when you said you just allowed yourself to feel and that it really helped and it was a relief to just allow yourself to feel and kind of get out of your own head for a little bit, which is something that's really hard to do when you're having anxious feelings and thoughts. And so I thought that was really great as well. That's so helpful when again when we're really willing to experience not just the thoughts that come up, but whatever physical sensations are happening in our body as a result of anxiety as well. And one thing I liked to do with this when I was experiencing a lot of anxiety in the form of both thoughts and physical sensations is I would, you know, observe it and stay with it. And I would try to welcome it, really try to welcome it in and sometimes talk to the anxiety or the physical sensations like a racing heart. I feel like there you are again. It's okay. We're safe. Um, and, this was something that helped me face, kind of show up to my anxiety a little bit differently emotionally and mentally, and to help reinforce some of those safety cues in the moment, which ultimately helped reduce the anxiety that I was experiencing. So I hope that helps. That's it for today. As always, if you have any questions, please write in. We're always here to answer your questions. And if you're interested in either group coaching or one-on-one coaching, head on over to thesleepcoachschool.com. We've got all the offerings there to help you for you to check out. And I look forward to next time. Take care, everyone.